In this video, you will learn to describe security mechanisms and what they include.
Dive into security mechanisms for enterprise security. So Stallings tells us that security mechanisms are defined as the combination of hardware, software, and processes that enhance IT security. Once again, so we talked about the principle of the security enforcement point. This is a technical implementation of a security policy. The security policy is derived from the business policy. So the business policy describes what we're going to do, not how we're going to do it. The security policy describes how we're going to do it, and the security enforcement point or the security mechanisms are the technical implementation of that security policy. So that point is taken up with the second bullet point, right? That it's a security policy implementation mechanism or delivery vehicle. And some examples of those, right, are protocol suppression, for example, to turn off FTP. That a security policy would be no FTPs allowed. The business policy, no unauthorized large-scale data movements. So the security enforcement point would be to disable FTP. There's another example about the identification and authentication. We've talked about the three aspects of identification, of access control. Identification, authentication, authorization. Those are all services that are going to be employed. And once again, we talked about how security services are the tools for security enforcement. Pulling out of X.800, Stallings gives us a number of examples of security mechanisms. So cryptography, digital signatures, access controls, you can read the list. These are actual, like I said, once again, security enforcement points. And at the top end, just above each one of these security mechanisms is a controlling security policy. And once again, the security policy is a technical policy that is derived from a logical business policy. So that's the food chain. So business policies, security enforcement points, or security mechanism. So you'll see that list that goes in. Those are referred to as specific services. There are ones that transcend specific policies. Those are trusted functionality, right? How do we trust our internal users, our privileged users, right? Two classes of users. We have general users, privileged users. General users, that's you and me. Privileged users are somebody who can change a security policy. That's the difference between the two. And privileged users should have a lot of attention on their good behavior. So security labels, right, those are referred to generally data. When we think about security classification within the government world, there's secret, top secret, sensitive but unclassified. In the private side, right, there's confidential, extreme confidential, business-centric. All of those are security labels that are applied to data. And how do we use those labels? Access control, data movement, right? There's some models that describe how those are used. The most famous of which is the Bell-LaPadula model. So other pervasive security mechanisms include event detection, right? That is the core of QRadar and security intelligence. That we can detect that something happened. Now the question is that something different and of a high risk? So this is where it moves into the anomaly side. So security audit trails is also pervasive. This is the ability to collect security intelligence data and ensure that that security intelligence data is available, is protected from unauthorized change, right? And can be sent to the correct individuals. So there's an analogy with security audit trails and criminal chain of custody, that you can always prove who's got responsibility for the data, for the security audits, and what they've done to that. So extremely important in the forensic world. And then recovery is recovery and backup, which affects how we react or our response to a security event. So once again, we see some analogies between this and the NIST security model and the IBM security framework described in Module 1. Here on slide 15, we see an example of some security mechanisms or some security enforcement points. This is looking primarily at the access control policies. We see those security enforcement mechanisms implemented initially in the DMZ between the two firewalls. Good design principle is they are of different designs, right? So that if an adversary defeats one firewall, it does not have to simply reapply that attack against the second. We see credential management in the security domain, and within the security management, being able to acquire events, manage credentials, which those credentials consist of roles, permissions, and identities.